Hello and welcome to this real talk conversation with Adam Yasmin. We are going to have an unfiltered, unedited conversation about life. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about what brought you here.
Sure. Wow. Well, where do I begin? Am, I've been a UX designer for the last 5 years. Prior to that, I've been uh, living other incarnations as a musician and visual artist. I also host a podcast myself called Wabi Sabi, which is another long form, unedited, and honest interview series as well. I've been a student of Taiwanese and Chinese tea culture for the last decade plus, and have infused tea as a mindfulness module to offer to the companies that I would do design contracts with, as a way, as my sort of not so secret agenda to help people slow down and reduce uh, the perils of distraction. I think more importantly, the peril of uh, becoming inhuman.
Mm.
And tea is a really amazing vehicle for that, not just personally and kind of selfishly, but just in as a immersive experience to create for people, to share with people. And I'm also transitioning out of UX in order to focus on um, digital wellness, digital well-being, or as the collective now would say, digital flourishing, to do my part in helping upgrade our culture, because
Mm.
we will get into we will get into the whys later, but um, that's where I am right now.
It's so beautiful, and I appreciate you sharing this with us. And I'm so excited for you to dive into the amazing benefits of tea and the meaning behind it. But I just want to note the synergy between everything that we're doing. And I just feel it. The energy is just so magnificent. And tea is a beautiful way to connect with our senses, to connect with our environment, our communities. But I'd love to hear from your perspective of what's so special in that regard for you.
There's so many reasons that want to come out at the same breath. Tea is an ancient technology. I mean, it, as a brewing methodology, there are many flavors to it. There are many ways of portraying that. Tea is so many things. It's the second most drunk beverage in the world after water.
Mm.
And so cultures across the globe brew and share tea as a means of um, uh, embracing human connection. It's also not only a way to embrace your neighbors, but also a way in which people of different, radically different backgrounds or faiths can sit at one table and have one unifying experience and or conversation over tea. Um, there's a book called The Book of Tea by actually a Japanese um, economist named Okakura Kakuzo, which is a fabulous book for anyone to read. I mean, any human being, it's worth reading, because uh, Okakura Kakuzo later in his life would, having learned English, would travel and spend time in like in the Northeast, like I think in Boston, and would lecture about the merits of Eastern thinking to Western economists. And um, there's so many quotes to pull from that book itself. But one thing that really strikes me just as we begin this conversation is that he wrote in his book, humanity has so far met in the teacup. And this is quite a fork in the road we're experiencing right now in humanity, because we are at the same time completely isolated at home to survive a global pandemic. Um, and yet we are hyper connected in a way that is overloading our brains and our common sense, our cultural common sense in a way. So yeah, before I kind of begin to trail into other places, I want to make sure I'm answering the question as you ask it. um, because right now I feel like I lost where I was going. The question, so forgive me. But
I it.
yeah,
It was a loaded question,
yeah,
but
yeah.
to me, I resonate with everything. And what's so beautiful about the tea ceremony is that there's so many layers. So yes, it could be the second most beverage in the world, and it's all of these other things. And even just thinking about the tea steeping in the water, it's like so metaphorical, and just so many beautiful things that it represents.
There's a lot. Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of mirroring in terms of, sort of systems in nature. Like if you think of, where water comes from, it's maybe starts like in snowpack. So the snow falls at the top of the mountain, the season begins to change, that snowpack starts to melt, it goes down the mountain, perhaps into an inlet or some kind of a stream. It gathers minerals and energy as it goes down the stream to get all the way down to, let's say, a water source or a reservoir or a river. And there's a unique mirror going there with the water I've boiled, put into this carafe. I usually use a kettle that has a gooseneck spout for really great pouring. But the water was boiled, put into the carafe. From the carafe, it'll go into my teapot, which, for the purpose of today, I wanted to show that this is a teapot, one of the oldest forms, the oldest shapes. It's called a gaiwan. And a gaiwan is essentially a cup with a lid. And it's a really great vessel to put loose leaf tea in because there's a lot of room inside for the leaf to unfurl over successive steepings. And I'm going to explain to you why multiple steepings of tea is a really great way of experiencing it in a sort of a granular analog sense. But essentially the lid is movable. So the lid can just tilt enough so I can, pour the tea out. It's very much a lot of hand and eye coordination. It is an immersive in the sense that it becomes an entrained flow state. It becomes like a moving meditation, much like writers probably are familiar with. If you're baking or cooking, you just get into this flow where things are coming and going. And there's the beauty of, sort of cycling through a pattern of movements. So to go back to the metaphor, the water is heated. It goes into the gaiwan. From the gaiwan into, this is a decanter. So from there into here, and from the decanter to the cup, and then from the cup to your lips. And so there's that several stages of movement to gather energy, but to also calm, to sort of calm itself, to infuse calm into what you're doing, to slow you down because there's these multiple steps going on, and to get to the right temperature by the time it reaches your lips. So there's that metaphor, that mirror. I'll give you, as we talk, I'll just give you a little more of an active demo. So in the beginning of every tea session, it's important to harmonize everyone involved in terms of the vessels. And so, with hot water, I want to rinse everything because I think, as I experience and as it's kind of written throughout these different uh, materials, uh, tea in this nature is really like 80% hygiene. and 20% like drinking. It's kind of like a um, it's more of a hygiene, not of the vessels themselves, but just of the state of being, the mind state that you're in as you approach, the thing that it is you're doing. So this one, sort of cups worth of water just to rinse everything so that everything is in a clean tabula rasa state, clean slate. The tea that I will be brewing is called Good Man in a Storm. And just to be a bit more contemporary and contextual with just the times that we're in right now. This tea is a pu'er tea. So pu'er denotes that it is an aged and fermented tea um, from Yunnan province, which is southwest China. Um, so the beauty is that it is a fermented tea. And so, like the magic of fermentation with anything else we eat or drink, there are some unique, biochemical attributes, um, beneficial bacteria, the works. Um, and this tea was pressed solely for the purpose of raising money um, for BLM organizations and the peak of the George Floyd protests, actually. This tea was created by a company called White 2 Tea, which I'm a huge fan of, which also sponsored my podcast last year. It's run by an expat um, who permanently is based in Southwest China now, but he made a limited pressing of this tea, and every penny sold of this tea went to these like 80 organizations. So I raised something like $10,000 to send to lots of bail funds, just given the nature of what that week was like. So I've put the leaf in, I've poured a little bit of water in to steep, and this very first steep is a ceremonial rinse that goes into my waste bowl. And the reason for that is because it's a part of a ritual called waking the leaf. The leaf itself has been sitting, it had been traveling. It started in one place and it's ended here. And the distance between point of origin and where we are now is quite a distance, not only from mainland China, but just through shipping and getting here to my home through the postal service. And much like we prepare or prep our food or vegetables or fruit before we eat them, we want to rinse them. And so this rinse is much like that. It's rinsing off any energetic impurities that we don't really want to take on as we drink, but it's also rinsing off a little bit of the caffeine that's inherent to Camellia sinensis, which is the tea leaf that we don't need for this style of tea drinking. So it's basically a 3-second rinse. And now I'm going to steep the tea in my gaiwan for a little bit longer. But the thing about this style of tea drinking, which is referred to as gongfucha, which is tea, it's translated loosely as tea with effort. And it is a Chinese tea technology, a tea brewing technology. So under a minute of a steep that I'm going to put into my decanter. So this means that with short, multiple steeps, I get to steep a tea out over a longer period of time. There's more control over the brew and the amount of caffeine that we'll be having in succession as opposed to in one steeping. If it's one steep in one mug, it's more concentrated that way. But again, the beauty of Gong Fu style tea brewing and tea drinking is that it is a methodical, slowing down, intentional and reverential and beautifully imperfect and kind of wabi-sabi messy thing that we get to experience any different day in a different season in a different mood in a different mindset. If I'm in sort of existential dread or if I'm in a better mood, there's no wrong way to approach it. and you get to also enjoy and focus on each vessel, each object for its beauty and its imperfections, and its each character has a character. Has such a personality. So thanks for letting me kind of um, roll through that whole description.
And how does it taste?
Tastes really emotional. I'm not going to lie. Just given the nature of why this particular tea exists. Um, so, I mean, we're on video, so I actually want to show you what this tea looks like in its original form, because pu'er is so special. It is because it is aged and fermented tea leaf. It is a tea that is alive in a sense. It's maturing with time. It's the only tea that is intentionally aged, because with time there is uh, there is a level of maturity that changes its hue and the essence of the leaf itself. And like we're talking now in the world of like sommelier, specialty with like, wines and cigars and whiskeys, things that require, age as part of their processing, where it's just basically allowed to sit somewhere for an extended period of time to just mature. This is that kind of this is a similar thing. So let me just bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to grab this.
Beautiful. I found this whole tea ceremony to be so beautiful and metaphorical, connecting to the elements, clearing, cleansing. I'm just in awe and excited to learn more.
So almost all pu'er comes pressed into shapes. The most common shape is a disc. It is wrapped in rice paper, and because it's wrapped in rice paper, it's allowed to breathe. This is very much an Alice in Wonderland kind of invitation to people to realize like there's such a deep rabbit hole here. But this is what the tea looks like when it's pressed. Pu'er tea, much like green tea, is a minimally processed tea. Where it in terms of processing, it forks away from green tea, because green tea is lightly hand manipulated, or it's maybe steamed with it's like sort of steamed process, maybe with another flavor, like things we know like jasmine, or other sort of pronounced flavors. And pu'er is none of those things. It starts out as tea leaf that is picked and wilted like green tea, but then it is pile fermented. So it's actually like beginning to, it's almost like a composting kind of a process to begin to introduce and to speed up fermentation. And then after it's pile fermented, it is then pressed by machine or by stone pressing into these shapes like discs. Other shapes are like bricks. I've seen balls. There's also a mushroom cap shape, because it's a proper shape for uh, uh, inducing, introducing aging into the processing. So the longer you can let it sit in a temperature and humidity controlled environment, um, without, free of aromas and like strong energies, the more it's going to mature. So that's a little, that's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but that's the little story of pu'er. The flavors are, in particular with this particular tea, this is an example of a really sort of fresh pu'er. The pu'er grown accustomed to over a long period of time is as tea that's a bit more aged, um, meaning like 4 to 20 years of age on it. So there's a different palate experience altogether. But this tea is really verdant. It really does taste like late spring, kind of on the onset of summer. There's like a light vegetal. There's just a lot of aromas going on. The nice thing about these sort of unglazed clay and ceramic vessels is that they leave a really good imprint of uh, the essence of what's left, so that you can really utilize all your senses. There's a touch sense that's so important. There's a tactile sense that's so important. There's a the aromas are so important. The taste is so important. Seeing the hue of each tea, from one tea to the next is so important. It is such a it's just so it's there to invite you, to pull you in, to not be distracted, and to like just get really real with this thing that's happening. um, but this tea in particular has these there's like a cooked stone fruit going on in terms of aroma, also with the taste, but then there's a little bit of like vegetal, a slight amount of astringency, something floral as well. um, it's so wonderful. There's like really nothing else. There's no other way to describe that.
Beautiful. And it's such an immersive
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah. And you can include other sort of extracurricular elements in terms of the overall ambiance. There are appropriate incense to burn. You could always add music to it. You can add like a sound bath if you wanted to add like a drone or some sound, or a composition or an arrangement of something that you like. And or it could be just full silence. It could be very solemn and kind of in a noble silence, um, type of an experience, so that it's just allowing perhaps that silence as a vehicle for allowing all kinds of latent energies or feelings or emotions, or sometimes hard memories, painful memories, things to come up to the surface when you're in that kind of receptive state. It's like when you're lying down at an acupuncture table and you're in that 45-minute eternal sort of state of just being receptive to subtle energies. It can get very much like that, especially as you go with, this is an example of a tea that was pressed, this spring. I have some 25-year age pu'er that is, how do I say this? It's not entheogenic or hallucinogenic or any kind, and on that kind of a level, it's not a substance that creates that kind of a experience based on, you know, other comparisons, like other substances. It's such a subtle, nuanced thing that the difference between a cup of $2 chuck and a 30-year oak barrel aged scotch. There's an experience that comes with that scotch. There's also a story you get to before that, reaching for that scotch. There's a lot of mirroring there as well. So there's a there's a tonality that's really important to remember, that the longer a tea has aged prior to you brewing it and drinking it, it just means that that tea has been sitting and meditating for X many years or X many decades until you had the intention of brewing it and imbibing it. And so there is a subtle but very special experience that comes with drinking teas of that nature.
The energy is just so beautiful. And I'm curious about the fermentation process and am noticing the metaphorical connection to us as people needing to age, and with the rice paper giving it space to breathe. and how, in a way, this time that we're experiencing is an invitation to age and breathe as we continue.
Yeah, the message couldn't be clearer right now. And it's something that I've been really patient in, but really wanting to get the message across to people as we, I have to give you a little bit of a background. Before the pandemic, when I was able to sit host tea ceremony or tea tasting for a group of people, let's say as an example, at one of the startup agencies, or excuse me, startup incubators that I worked with as a UX designer, Techstars, you may have heard of them by chance. um, I would, as a as a in a pure, as like a sanity check, while I was working on site at this startup incubator, I would go on the office Slack channel, and I would say, hey, on Tuesdays from 2 to 3:30 p.m., I'm going to go into this empty conference room. And this is something that I do. It's something it's meant to be enjoyed by others. Anyone is welcome. If you have 5 minutes, or ideally, you want some time, you want 30 minutes if you can, the longer the better. But join me in this conference room. And so I would have CEOs, hardware engineers, heads of marketing, like people, just people, like different people coming and sitting, not really have a sense of what's going on, but being able to just like see it and either absorb what they can from it to allow themselves to slow down even temporarily was so important of a atmosphere to create for other people. I've been hosting tea in very different other settings, like lots of conscious gatherings and art openings and festival stuff. And there was a whole Burning Man phase, and it seemed very apropos to festival culture, because festival culture is about immersive. We're camping for 5 days. We're all kind of sweaty and dirty and dancing together, and we have time to not do anything. We can sit and talk and eye gaze for hours. So tea was very easy to um, bring into that fold, but to bring it to tech companies, to yeah, to groups of people who were on, like, productivity cycles, and to do the work there became really important to me. I mean, mostly just because I was going in and out of contracts as a UX designer, just realizing we're driving ourselves insane, and this how is this going to last? And so the pandemic coming was this um, I'm not going to say it was a blessing in disguise, because it's not on so many levels, but in the sense of, for those of us who are able to work from home, have some whether we're parents or not, if there's some amount of time that we can spend for ourselves, 10 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever you have to bring to it, it will, the ROI is immeasurable. And so I've been trying to find the ways, using outlets like Instagram, to invite people to um, experiment with doing this instead of doom scrolling, or what I like to call disasterbation. Um, like, there in any in a everything in moderation. It's okay to scroll, to inform yourself, but not to, like, go into a fight or flight state, because now we're just living in a fight or flight state. And so doing this, even virtually, like, it's possible to have this kind of beautiful human intimate connection, or some shared comfortable silence, which is really interesting to experience virtually. But it I there's so much of it that's so important it's only translatable in person. So I'm patiently waiting for when we're able to gather again and safely and respectfully and to do this, because I love being in service to other people in this regard. Yet I'm, again, to uh, without being a broken record right now, but to encourage people that there are these tools, and you don't even need a set like this. It could just be a bowl and leaves. It's all you need to begin to to put your phone on airplane mode for 10 minutes. Bowl, leaves, water, silence. 10 minutes. It could be just an embodiment experience, almost like a somatic um, experience. And you can get really granular with all these tools too.
Beyond beautiful. It's so cleansing, and just the process is a flow. We need to consciously go to that flow state.
This is a very kind of hardware oriented path to that. You know, some people like using the Headspace app or Calm. People like using apps to do that because it kind of gets them sort of out of their head into their body. And this for me is like a sort of revert. It's more like it's not reverse or inverse. I think the metaphor is really just waves crashing. You know, there's water going out and receding, and so there's water going through this and coming in, and so it's all these sort of micro movements that just are important for me, maybe just chemically speaking, or the way I'm wired is it's important. It's really impactful for me.
It's so beautiful, and I'm grateful that we were able to share this amazing resource with people, because really all we need is the intention to show up and be present with our hot water and leaves and
Mm-hmm.
taste buds and what we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing, hearing, and just experiencing on a full immersive level.
Mm-hmm. And it's not only amazing to do it in a in a in an isolated sense, you know, and just having like I'm having a me experience, right? Or maybe the tea is having a me experience. I'm not quite sure. It's fun to play with those concepts, but in this setting, virtually one on one, or maybe in like a small group, it's really cool to have to be witnessed, and everyone can do it on their own terms at home or in whatever, wherever they may be, in a cabin or in their office or something, or in the car with a mug like that. You know, there's no poo-pooing on anything at this stage of survival and hopefully surthrival, you know, through this pandemic. Um, you know, but there's a whole like tradition and sort of there's a lineage, you know, with these tools in this style, and there's a lot. It's very much a rabbit hole, and it's absolutely wonderful to be tumbling down it, and to do it with other people um, is important.
Absolutely. And I know there's so much depth, and we could talk, and this is just the beginning of the conversation because I know we're just scratching the surface. But I'm grateful that the community that's bringing us together, and as we can continue to share this and inspire others to have these moments of immersion with our bodies and the energy around us.
Absolutely. What are you drinking, by the way?
I'm drinking some tea from the Wells Apothecary. It's a local place near my house.
What's in there?
We have some, honestly, I don't want to mispronounce it, so I'm just going to put it here.
Oh, good.
But
Elder, astragalus, donquai, licorice, bone set, mullein, elderberry, and skullcap. That's great. So what? You have astragalus, which is a wonderful adaptogen, like a nerve tonic. The elders for um, immune support, as well as what other? Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, that's an immune supportive and adaptogenic blend. That sounds wonderful.
Was made with love, and
Hmm.
I'm really excited to up my tea game and have more tools to really fully immerse of it. But this
Totally.
little steeper is a little dinosaur, and it's the little things that make me smile. It's like meep meep meep. We got the little dinosaur.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
All
beginner,
about those things.
but everything counts.
Whatever you have. I reached for my phone because I wanted to, I know we don't have probably much more time in this conversation, but there's one quote from the book that I would love to impart with, to say goodbye with, if that's appropriate to include here.
Beautiful.
Um,
I appreciate the transparency.
yeah. Um, I should have a better, it's funny to now be looking for the quote is really funny. So this comes directly from Okakura Kakuzo's The Book of Tea. Um, and I'm going to be hodgepodging this just a little bit because there's a part of it that I know, but I wanted to read the other parts of it from this quote. Teaism is a cult founded on the adoration of the beautiful among the sordid facts of everyday existence. It inculcates purity and harmony, the mystery of mutual charity, the romanticism of the social order. It is essentially a worship of the imperfect, as it is a tender attempt to accomplish something possible in this impossible thing we know as life. That quote always helps bring me into uh, the moment, whatever the moment is holding.
I appreciate you sharing it with our community, and I'm so excited to continue the conversation for our
Ditto.
next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the real talk and just seeing this immersive experience. And just a little bit of background, MEEP stands for Meditative Experiences Evolving Our Purpose. So this
Perfect.
is literally so aligned and just the beginning of our tea experiences together, because this was just so wonderful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye.
Until next time.
See ya.